So what's a private equity group and how does that impact different franchise brands?
Welcome to Fordify Live with your host, Ford Saeks.
Well, that's what we're going to be finding out today with our special guest, Todd Recknagel. Now, he's got 30 years experience in franchising, but I'm going to let him explain his background. So, Todd, take it away. Tell me, where did you get into franchising and how have you stayed so successful for so many years?
Sure. Well, first on your second question, Ford, the successful, I've had a lot of failures in there and learned most from the failures. So I do want to be clear on that. But I started out with more of a financial discipline, was a banker and an investment banker and an MBA in finance. In fact, very early in my career, co-founded a small fund that was like a mezzanine fund that became an Inc. 500 company. So I was doing more of that real early on as a young man before franchising. But I found myself working on other folks' businesses and helping them grow, helping them finance. And my dad was an entrepreneur, my grandparents were entrepreneurs, and I just had that itch that I needed to do something for myself. And so my first foray into franchising was in the 1990s with purchasing a territory for Blimpie subs and salads. I was an area developer in Blimpie and then grew units, owned and operated my own units, helped develop a bunch of units in Western Michigan, and became actually the largest franchisee in Blimpie and ultimately chaired the national board and so grew quickly during that sandwich growth when Blimpie and Subway were going strong. So
Yeah, but now you've got multiple brands. So for those of you listening, we are live right now on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter, and a few other places. Obviously, Twitter is just the announcement. And we're talking to Todd Recknagel. He's the managing partner for 320 Group. That's the word 3, number 20 group. And you have multiple brands within your group. Share just a few of them. I mean, because I pulled them up on my screen, and there's a lot.
Sure. Well, I can still go a little bit to background and then maybe some of the brands
Please,
today.
absolutely.
So I wanted to leave that open for you more. The After the Blimpie run, we helped them grow and had a large group of 12 units and sold out of that in 01, 02. Sadly, Blimpie really fell on more hard times after that and ended up declining. So we were glad we got out of that at that time. But I purchased into Service Brands and became a partner in Service Brands and Mr. Handyman, and then became CEO of Mr. Handyman. Helped them grow from about 20 to 25 units that we had at the time. It had just been established about 18 months before that. So they were still kind of in that emerging, set up the model kind of phase.
Right.
Helped grow that to 300 units across the country and took that as a brand. I was with them for about 9 years. And we were able to grow the sales to almost $100 million level, at that time. And then now those brands, Molly Maid and Mr. Handyman, ended up selling to Neighborly in 2016. And then different brands were sold back to the different partners. We were involved in helping PuroClean grow, helping involved Ducks grow, 800 Dry Clean. We had a number of different franchise brands. So kind of cut my teeth as a franchisee, multi-unit franchisee, an area developer, and then with multiple franchisor brands. And so fast forward today, after I left Service Brands, I bought a company with a private equity firm down in Charleston, South Carolina. It was outside of franchising at the time, but we were looking to possibly pivot and do some franchising. It was an energy efficiency company. And we grew that from 27 million revenue to 270
Wow.
through two different private equity sponsors. And that was really a rocket ride over a 5 or 6 year period. Left that as a board member and a partner in that, but was CEO of that most of the time, and then transitioned it to the next private equity firm, Colbert and Company. So that was a smashing success. And I was also partnered with Take 5 Oil Change at the time. Now, both of those companies had Trivest Capital, which is still a partner of mine to this day. Trivest is in many of our deals. In fact, I think we're on our 8th or ninth deal with Trivest. And we have incredible private equity partners in Trivest and Stonehenge Capital and Geneva Glen Capital. We just have, awesome people and partners behind us. And so we were able to grow that. We helped grow Take 5 from 20 units to 90. And then exited out of that to Rourke Capital through their Driven Brands group. And today I think they have 850 units, and so that model is still going strong. And so both my wife, Christy Mayu, and I were both husband and wife, but we're also partners in 320 Capital Group. We've just really been blessed with being able to be multipliers of multipliers, where we're able to go and help, whether it's a multi-unit franchisee or a franchisor. We come in as operating partners, and we've been able to put in a lot of the systems that help accelerate growth, whether it's a sales system or whether it's a CRM or a call center or what have you. We've done this kind of as a wash, rinse, and repeat in any system we're in. So we formed a family office, which is our investment group here, 320 Group. And after having a number of successful exits, and we just kind of plowed back in with capital, back in with the same thing. We're usually the minority partner in a lot of our deals, and we have a big PE fund backer. It enables us to maybe look a lot bigger than we really are, which is okay. Which is okay with us. And so we've been able to partner in with Massage Envy. We started with a group of 7 that were wholly owned, doubled the earnings on that group, pulled together a merger of 21 more units, brought in our PE trusted partners again, and that was 28 at that time. And then we've grown that group to 95 now, and we're the largest franchisee in Massage Envy. Have a whole incredible C-suite of people that are CEO and CFO and COO, and people that we love to work with. And so we coach that C-suite, help with the operating partner. We also have we started with a wonderful group out of Sola Salons.
Yeah.
We love that model. Love helping Sola pros become entrepreneurs on their own. It just so fits with our core values, helping people grow. And so we started with a group that had 30, and now we've helped them grow to 60 units. And so I chair the board there, and we've made a substantial investment there. And so we're the largest in that particular system. We're also partner in a wonderful faith-based commercial cleaning company called Office Pride. And so they call themselves the Chick-fil-A of commercial cleaning. And so we love those guys too. Again, all of our companies have their own C-suites and teams, so that Christy and I are able to just be lean and mean and kind of be blessed and sort of manage the investment and help coach the C-suite. And we have another company called Quattro, which does a lot of multi-unit accounting. It's a fintech firm. And so we were able to grow that from probably, I think it was 20 million revenue when we started, to about 100 million. And we have other franchise partners in that deal. We just exited 80% of that last year. Hung on to 20% because it was growing so fast. We didn't want to sell it all. So,
Right.
And we own a tile company in Atlanta that's a specialty high-end tile. They serve a lot of franchise brands on refreshes and stuff like that. But they have a lot of other commercial clients, big commercial clients, like they did the Orlando airport,
Oh,
for
wow.
example. So,
I spend a lot of time
um,
there.
yeah, right, right. So that's just a sampling of some of the companies to give you an idea.
Well, I want to go back to something you started with, and I think it's really important for our listeners. And if you're listening right now on the Business Grow Show podcast, so the audio track from this broadcast becomes the podcast, we're listening to Todd Recknagel. You can find him at 320 Group. It's spelled out the word 3 and then 20 and then group.com. So, Todd, one of the things I think is really a foundation. I know that, we were talking in the green room, you're talking about with your years of experience that you've seen patterns. There's patterns for both successes and patterns for both failures. Now, as an entrepreneur myself, I've had multiple companies and, 3 were really successful. The other ones were mediocre. I mean, I never went bankrupt, but some of them I just, didn't manage well or whatever. And I want to go back to something that is really important for our listeners is I think your foundation in understanding finance, pardon me, understanding finance and money and cash flow and how to manage the business is so important. I've said on a lot of my episodes that people are smart in one of 3 areas, maybe 2. First, delivering the product or service. Whatever the brand is, whether you're inside franchising or outside franchising, you're a practitioner or you're delivering a quality product or service. Maybe you're a manufacturer. Number 2, you understand finance and accounting and leadership. You're in that bucket. Or number 3, you're in marketing and sales. And so I've always been really strong at marketing and sales. I can accelerate sales. I can do top line revenue. But like a lot of franchisees, sometimes the financial management hasn't been good. Like I had businesses that were, $50 million, but I was still only taking home about $90,000 in the salary. And I was at 5% profit after everything. So I think it's really important, to share some of your patterns of successes and failures. But I know that from all the franchise brands that I speak to every year in service B2B and B2C, when I ask them what their top 3 challenges are, number 1, it's usually employees and staffing and leadership. They want to find, attract, and retain top talent. Number 2, they want to grow the business. How do they expand their influence, dominate their local trade area, and how do they accelerate new and repeat sales? Or number 3, they just need to manage more effectively because I'm surprised at how many franchisees don't understand their balance sheet, income statement,
Right.
chart of accounts, just basic things, average transaction, lifetime value of a customer. When I go speak at some of these things, I get, deer in the headlights look. So with
Right.
your enormous experience in growing brands and working in brands, what are some of the patterns for successes and failures that you've
Sure.
come across?
Sure. Well, just to kind of reflect a little bit on a couple things you mentioned, I am more financial and strategic. Christy is more on the marketing and
Right,
operations
which is
side,
why the pattern of the team works so
and
good.
so we have kind of a nice mix where we work back and forth, and we're able to kind of help. But then you do have to kind of look at the holistic picture. And I always like to, if I speak or share or if I'm mentoring somebody, I go back to a great book that is years ago, but if you haven't read it lately and looked at it again and reapplied some of the principles, you could learn from it. And I learn from it every day. So I've gone back to it. But it's a book called Good to Great by Jim Collins. And everybody kind of usually says, oh, yeah, that's a classic book. But some of the key points out of there were the great companies and great leaders found a formula, and they understood what their margins were, and they found a formula. And one that stands out is like Walgreens was saying, okay, we want to be the highest percentage profit per square foot. So how do we rearrange stuff? How do we figure out what our profitable items are? How do we convert that? So for example, we did that with Take Five. With Take Five Oil Change, we looked and both had 3 different choices. Coca-Cola will tell you that people have central tendency. They'll pick the middle choice.
Yep.
We priced that up a little higher. Wasn't crazy like our top choice. Wasn't the value thing like the bottom choice. It was a touch higher. And then we had created an oil deal to private label our own high-end oil made by Quaker State, best you could possibly
Right,
get,
right.
but it was our private label. And so consequently, it was a touch higher price and a value product for us to buy. And so that created excess margin at that middle level where people would go anyway. Served the customer incredibly well, served our franchisees and our profitability well. Just some of those tweaks and moves all of a sudden moved our gross margin up significantly. And as we know, profits and margin take care of a lot of things. A pretty building, franchisee profits. You want to buy your wife something at Christmas. When you're doing that stuff, it helps. And so that's another concept in the Good to Great, that once you figure out some of those formulas in your business, you create a flywheel effect, and you wash, rinse, and repeat. You continue to stay on that cycle. So another example, fast forward to today, and some of the portfolio companies that we have today, in Massage Envy, we're the largest employer of therapists in the country now, the largest single employer, because our group is so large. I think we have something like 1,800 therapists. Well, you can't sell memberships and help people get in and fill all your capacity unless you have incredible care for your therapists, and if you have to have a recruiting program for your therapists, and then you have to train your managers on how to keep and retain your therapists. That is your production. And so we have set up that whole system to be able to do that well. So consequently, our retention, our hiring, we're hiring more therapists than it's almost like we're opening two new clinics every single month, given all the therapists we're hiring. But we've made that process streamlined and really good and really efficient, and we're watching those metrics because those metrics matter. So then you say, okay, well, is that repeatable? Yep. Poured over to the Sola Salons group. We have 2,000 chairs. We want to bring we've built 20 new salons in the last 2 years alone with the growth. So we've added all these chairs. Well, we had to fill 850 chairs.
Wow.
So if a single franchisee fills 30 chairs, we're all of a sudden filling 30 salons of chairs over a certain period. So we set up a similar sales team, similar training, brought on the right people, brought on the right lead source, help them try to self lead. You know, it's a busy time, so they're super busy. So we added a call center with an overring so that they could catch all calls, and then we did automation so they could book their tours and appointment. And so we did things that the franchisor or no other franchisee in the entire industry has ever done. Were we super brilliant? Nope. It was just simply the same pattern of wash, rinse, and repeat that we had seen in other places, that we poured it over, and that we're cognizant of that we've got to fill these units, we've got to increase that margin, we've got to keep our therapists and keep them happy. All of those things send more money down to the bottom line. So whether you're paying off debt or whether you're growing or plowing money back in, you can do what you want with your capital, but it's got to be there to succeed. And and one of the other points that is key, it comes down to the last point in Good to Great, and that's the humility of the leader.
Right.
And we've just found that, how did we learn this stuff? Well, we actually learned it from some of our greatest failures, from some of the screw ups. Wait a minute, what did we do wrong? What was the difference in that pattern to this pattern? And so we learned it in the failures, frankly. Blimpie toward the end wasn't a lot of fun, and some of the things we've tried didn't work, and so we learned more from that. So we want to be humble as leaders and say, yeah, we always don't know what we don't know. So a lot of times out in the marketplace, we don't know what we don't know. And then as these young private equity folks come along. A lot of our partners are younger than Christy and I are, and they are smart as whips. Oh my gosh, we'll say, gosh, it'd be great to know the metric on that and have it. And you all of a sudden have a young MBA on the phone, and just in the background, he quick whips up a spreadsheet, and emails it to you, and already has the number. And we're like,
That's amazing.
whoa, in my best day, I couldn't do that. And so we're constantly learning. We love being on that front end, learning. So we might have a little bit of wisdom from some of our wash, rinse, repeat patterns, but we love sharing it and then watching how they're so smart and they add so much to us, frankly. So we're really blessed with that.
Well, I know that, the more I've been in business now, I'm 62 years old. I've been in business since I was 15. And the more, the more I learn, the more I know I don't know. Right. I mean, so,
Right.
even when I work with a brand and I come in and work as an opening keynote or closing keynote, I'm there as a third party endorsement to get them to follow their systems and to use the corporate tools. And then I'm there to help the local franchisee be inspired to just rethink, reframe, and take advantage of all these tools and take advantage of the opportunities in their local market. Just shift their mindset, because sometimes they get so focused on the corporate isn't doing this, I'm not getting enough leads, when in reality, how much time are they spending in their marketplace, or is their location clean? Have they changed the flyers on the windows? Is the bathroom clean? All the marketing in the world won't overcome poor service. Are they delivering good service? Are they mystery shopping or secret Santa, or not Santa, but secret shopping their location? So, I've really been humbled about that. And that's why having guests like you on that are sharing decades of experience growing up, $1 million, multi-million dollar companies. And if you're listening, you're listening to someone who's extremely successful, but I can tell even in your thought pattern that you're letting the marketplace tell you what works, right? You're going to test something, you're going to try something,
Yeah.
you're going to get those metrics, you're going to get that feedback. And I think that that's really important, that those leaders that think they know everything and don't know what they don't know, or they're just so fixated on one thing without really listening to what the marketplace says. I had a sporting goods company in the early 90s, grew it up. I was in 4,000 dealers. I was in Sharper Image and Williams Sonoma and 40 specialty catalogs. I was in mass merchants. I was in all these different channels of distribution with my product. And I needed to grow, so I brought in a partner. And, that was an interesting experience, because you have to do your due diligence before you bring in a partner, which I'm sure you could talk to. And so I brought the partner in, and then I focused on the marketing side. He was more of the finance side, just like you and your wife, right? We had to have a cohesive team. Well, one day he decided that we needed to have different colors. So I was manufacturing the aluminum extrusions in silver and black. It was a bicycle storage rack that went from floor to ceiling, that sandwiched between the floor and ceiling to store bicycles. So I invented it, I patented it, and I grew it up from a napkin to, millions in business. Well, one day I went back in the warehouse, and there was red and orange and like all this aluminum that came in anodized in different colors. And so I immediately called the vendor and like, hey, you guys messed up. We only do silver and black. And they go, oh, no, we got an order from Brian. You ordered like 10 different colors. I said, no, we didn't. And then I went and talked to Brian, my partner, who, we should have conditions of satisfaction for communication. And Brian's like, well, no, I was talking to my wife, and she just thinks we would sell so many more if we had different colors. We had to give those racks away, because what we found, just like you said with Coca-Cola, the middle choice, when someone was buying a storage rack, they wanted to showcase their bicycle. They didn't want to showcase the rack. So if they had a really fancy, pretty bicycle and they wanted to hang it up like art, they wanted the bicycle to stand out, and so it didn't work. So the point was, there was a decision made without any data, without any prior testing, focus groups, any knowledge, and without using their partners, and without even coming to me, because I would have told them, no, I'm talking to the dealers, the sporting goods shops, the mass merchants, the chain stores. I'm talking to these guys. I know what they need from a packaging standpoint. So, that was a lesson learned. And then one of the other lessons was, we were manufacturing a product for a client. I had a think tank, and we gave the product, the specs to the client, and said, here, this is how the box should work. This is going to do everything. Well, they didn't take our advice, and they went and they packaged it differently than what we told them. And they were 1 inch too big, so it couldn't ship through FedEx and UPS. So they bought all this inventory, they bought all this tooling, they manufactured the whole product, and then they couldn't ship it. And it was too big for Walmart for the planograms, for the end caps and everything. And I'm like, they didn't use the knowledge. And I think the lesson here is you don't know what you don't know, but you've got to ask the right questions. And I think sometimes, I always say in my keynotes, if you're asking the wrong question, the answer doesn't matter. But you've got to be open. And that's what I like about you, Todd. Just listening to your story and your history with all these different brands, is I know you were listening to the marketplace, you were listening to the leaders, you were listening to your partners. And I think that's just a really great lesson in leadership, is you just have to have instinct, but you also have to have some statistics to back it up.
Right. Yep. And you have to test things.
Yes.
We do some charity work today, supporting ministry over in India, as an example. And we were just over there in November, and we met up with a manufacturer. We're trying to help them be self-sustaining in country. And so this manufacturer is making these kiosks. They can make money on these. And so they brought us in to kind of help multiply and duplicate the effort. And the manufacturer said, "Hey, we love your cause. We'll front 100 kiosks for you because we love the cause." And so they wanted to just roll with it. Oh, wow, 100 oh man, let's just. And I'm like, wait a second. First, there was some user fees down the road that nothing comes free. And so you do have to pay for these kiosks.
Right.
And they kind of figured, well, you can raise money for that because you guys are a ministry, right? I mean, that should happen. I'm like, well, we're not going to lose money on this. The whole idea is to try to support this. And so we said, let's go ahead and test it in 5. Well, we went ahead and tested it in 5, and we're learning so much, just like, that we're tweaking, changing the whole model, frankly. But that's just part of our wash, rinse, and repeat. We're just not going to go into something like that deep. And those are some of the things that, we learn from the marketplace. And they even apply in a market like India, where I know nothing about the business we're in, or India. But they're the same principles that when we get in, and it may have looked like we were kind of holding it back. And no, we're not holding it back. We're hoping to ensure the success, actually, by going into that test. And so, we get that. We also, with that energy efficiency company, it was interesting that we had landed a big contract with Duke Energy to ship out energy efficient bulbs, LED bulbs, to people. And it's part of the whole conservation effort. And so it was at the time that was going on. And we got in there with teams, brought FedEx in, brought our teams, our manufacturing people, brought our folks from China. And we designed the box to be perfectly inside their scope and their specs.
Right.
And then we got into their software and started with it. And this was in the early days of this, 2011, 12. We started with we would be the first FedEx modal point. We'd print the label. Nobody was doing this at that time. And so the package in our warehouse would have that label. And then, because data can travel anywhere, we have eventually evolved so that it was manufactured overseas with box and everything. And then that label would be there. So it started to make it more virtual. So it was now out of our warehouse. And then we were able to track and then turn those, when those packages got to people's homes, those went back to the utility as savings, and then they would get paid for that out of the energy reduction fund. And so we had created software and packaging and everything, designed that whole process, that segment of our business grew to like 45, 50 million.
That's wild.
But we started with that kind of that design and creating sort of the solution inside of, what are you really trying to get to? Okay, you efficiently want to get that package in the end user's hands so that you can count the savings. They now have LED bulbs. They're going to install them and we'll have energy savings. And so we designed everything around that. And they couldn't believe how we were able to do it for, 1/3 of what the next guy was doing it for, because of the efficiency of that process. And in the end, we became the largest shipper with Federal Express in the Southeast U.S. We had no idea. We had no idea.
Right.
FedEx
Just
called us
sheer
one day
nature
and
of
said,
success.
"Hey, you guys are up for an award." And we're like, "An award? Like, what do you mean?" And they said, "Well, you're the largest shipper in the Southeast right now." And that was before Amazon. I'm sure Amazon's knocked us off, but that was 2012 or 13, something like that.
Well, I have a formula. Breathing here. I have a formula in marketing. I run a digital agency called Prime Concepts, and in Prime Concepts, I work with my team and all of our clients to follow test, track, modify, and repeat. So we come up with the best guess. We do our research, and we test. We track the results. What are the impressions? What are the conversions? What are the metrics that we're going to measure? And then we modify one element, unless you're using the Taguchi method where you're trying to track, multiple methods at the same time. So we do A/B split testing, and then we repeat what worked. And so it's a lot with your rinse and repeat that you're talking about in that formula. And I have found that just works. And over time, I have had patterns. And one of the patterns that I came up with when I work as a marketing consultant for brands is I look at three things. I look at their message. Is their value prop? What are their message value propositions? And I put them into a big sales dictionary. Number two, who's their ideal client? And not just the client, but who's the consumer and who's the person, influencing it and making the decision. And then number three, what's the method that they're going to use to get that message to the market? Because whenever I work with a brand, and I work with franchisees and inside and outside franchising businesses, and they'll say, well, pay-per-click doesn't work, or direct mail doesn't work, or outside sales doesn't work. And it's interesting because their decision-making process is usually because they implemented the process not effectively. It's not that it doesn't work. Now, there are certainly some methodologies that don't work. So, for example, as a keynote speaker, I'm not cold calling CEOs to go speak. I mean, CEOs aren't going to take my call to go speak. That's crazy, right? So there are methods that don't work, but it's about those combinations of message to the right market, using the right method. And when you get those combinations, it's like a combination lock. All the digits line up and the lock opens, and that opens it up to profit. So that's where I start with any brand when I do a strategic discovery day or something. When I come in, because I fly in and we do a full day discovery day, I want to know the basic metrics. And it's so funny because they're like, "Oh, this was so great and so insightful." I'm like, this is basic 101. What are you selling? Who are you selling it to? Why are they taking but it's interesting because, I'll just tell you, Todd, when I first started the speaking business, I got hired to go speak at Comcast, one of my first keynotes. And, I was overwhelmed because at the time I was a newer speaker. This was, 30 years ago. And everybody in the room made $500,000 or more. They were very successful. Comcast managed, at the division I worked for, managed all of the arenas across the United States. So it was their outside salespeople and all their general managers, and their average salary in the room was about $200,000 to $250,000, and some made way more than that. And so I was intimidated because what am I going to say to these people that are so successful and make so much money? And I went in and we were talking about marketing, and I asked them to show me some of their advertisements because this was pre-internet, right? And they gave me, I said, who's the sharpest guy in the room? And this guy named Bob came up to the front of the room, and I'm looking at his ads because I was doing critiques on all their marketing. And I opened up this newspaper ad, and they were promoting Sesame Street Live. And it was a full page ad for Sesame Street Live in Philadelphia. And so I said, how much did you spend on this ad? Well, we got remnant space. It was $70,000 for the frequency. So they invested $70,000. And I said, okay, what's your message? Well, I looked at the ad and it said, let's be friends. Okay, so it was a big picture of Big Bird. And I said, who are you sending that message to? And they said, well, kids, of course. I said, so let me get this straight. You spent $70,000 to send the message, let's be friends, to kids using the newspaper. And then I flipped it open and it was the financial section. And so that was the start of 9 years working with Comcast, helping them with their marketing. But it was interesting that these, MBA graduate marketing experts, the basics, just, if it's not working, if what you're doing isn't working, it's that combination. You have to go back to the basics. what's your value proposition? Who's your market? Like we had a Take 5, a car wash 2 blocks from my house. So there's a Take 5 oil, very successful up the street, right? And on the corner, they put a Take 5 car wash in. Well, across this 2 blocks away, there's a Tommy's car wash, and there's like 3 franchise brands of car washes within a mile. And I'm thinking, because we walk our dog over there, and I'm just thinking to my wife, I understand the value of putting like there's a Jamba Juice and Annie Ann's right next to each other, because so there's advantages to having certain stores like shoe stores sometimes will be together. But I'm thinking about this. There's no way they're going to stay in business. They were out of business in 90 days. They shut the building down and now they've sold it. Now, I don't know if it was I don't know the background. Maybe they did it for land grab or I don't know. But I just thought there's no way they could sustain it because there was too many choices. And when I saw the logo, I didn't understand what they did. So anyway, my point of that is, would they been more successful with a different location? Did they do their research? People do need to wash the cars. I have a membership for Tommy's, but anyway, it was just, that's a lot to unpack.
I sort of believe, having been in the membership business, which is, Tommy's and Massage Envy.
Right. 'Cause I'm a subscriber. I'm a member of Massage Envy for like 9 years now.
Yeah, right. And there are a limited number of folks that are in that upper income that have a value mindset of, you know what, at a good value, like if the first massage is 75 and the second massage is 55, and I'm going to get a couple a month, at a good value, it's impossible to beat the quality of Massage Envy and a good price. So there's only so many of those Uber users out there. So if you put the Mr. Car Wash and a Tommy's and a Take 5 car wash, you're going to have a limited number of those high-end Uber users that are going to do the unlimited monthly car wash too. So yeah, that probably didn't have its, research. The other thing, I thought you really said it well. I love the combination lock because I think some of the most profound concepts are really very simple. And the reason some very smart people in your audience heard you say that and then went, aha, that combination lock works, because a lot of times those profound concepts are simple. And so an example would be back in the 90s when we were in Blimpie, one of the things that we did is we made sure the service and the quality was great and everything was really good. Our stores were extremely well run. We had great operations teams. And we also controlled our own advertising. We had a great agency that said, people are super busy, television's changing, appointment TV is coming in. And they said, busy people listen to radio, but you still need to be seen. And so we were on billboard and radio, and we controlled the whole market. So Grand Rapids, Muskegon, Holland, all of those areas, if there was people traveling back and forth, our stores were seen and our billboards were seen. And then they would hear it on the radio. And then occasionally we would run those bumps with direct mail.
Right.
And we were operating at 50% average unit volumes ahead of the rest of the system because that formula worked. And then when the franchisor took over all the advertising and said, oh, hey, we're going to go to TV, because that was everybody's dream in the 90s. Hey, you're going to be on national TV now. The staff, the money at corporate, the money they had to cut the ads, you could only cut 2 or 3 ads, the amount of time you'd try to buy on cable, our visibility dropped and it became a problem. And then as they were grabbing for dollars, all of a sudden they were taking money on the food costs. Yep. And sadly, when that, all of a sudden now your margins start to sag. Same thing happened with Blimpie, same thing happened with Quiznos. And I remember somebody saying to me in about 2001 or 2, you know what, there's just not room for another 2,000 member or another 2,000 units, and Blimpie may just be destined for decline. It's too crowded. Well, after 2002, Subway went to 35,000 worldwide. Jimmy John's went over 2,500. Jersey Mike's went over 2,500. Firehouse Subs went over 2,000. And so you can't tell me it's market It's what you're doing in the microeconomics in the marketplace. Now, fast forward to today, Gary Vaynerchuk, I think at IFA a year or two ago,
Yep, I was there.
said Facebook is a buy. And I think it is still a buy. If you need those leads and you figure out the formula like you're talking in today's digital world, you're not going to be on radio and billboards anymore.
Right.
Your new way to reach the busy folks is down that channel. And if you have an effective campaign like you're talking, the AB, I'm going to come to you and your digital agency next time, and because you're tracking it down in a different way of what works and what doesn't work. So those concepts that seem profound really are quite simple. I don't think they change, and they move from business to business. The same.
Yeah, that's why and once I learned that formula in the sporting goods business, I applied it to the medical industry. I invented some products for labs in the medical industry. I invented some products in childcare, and I always went back to that same formula. And now, as a strategic marketer, my title's Business Growth Accelerator. Well, really, my title would be marketing expert, but marketing, people don't pay for marketing. They think it's a department. Business growth is a benefit. So I'm always lead with benefits, substantiate your claims with features. So the benefit is let's accelerate your business. The feature is, well, let's improve your marketing, let's improve your impact, let's improve the cost to acquire a customer so you get more margins and you get more profit. You don't go broke making a profit. And on the other side of that, profit hides a lot of mistakes. I've worked with a lot of businesses that are extremely profitable, and they think they're just doing great, but they're dumping all this money into all these different things, but they've never measured anything. They've never really said, well, why am I spending 80,000 here or 20,000 here? So I think that fiscal responsibility, I think, is so important. Well, I want to get to a question. I know through your years of learnings and successes, you've credited a lot to God's guidance through your career. How has that influenced your decision-making processes and your leadership style in the highly competitive industries that you're in?
Yeah. Well, one, I think he's probably the chief leader of humbling me, number one. So working me through the failures and picking me up, dusting me off, and so that's would be number one. I happen to be a Christian, and so we follow Jesus Christ. So that's number one. Number two, I guess, being a follower, I know that I'm loved, and so I know even if I'm in the middle of a struggle, I know there's an answer somewhere, and God loves me and will work me through. And so, on a more practical sense, as I've gone and grown, we've actually gotten into a little bit of a learning to walk more in the Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And follow, pray on things each day, pray on every decisions. Christy and I oftentimes will say that God is part of our investment committee, and if we pray on something, a lot of times we'll hear a message and don't do this, don't do this, go here, do this. It's really been amazing. I did not do that early in my career. I was a Christian for many, many years. But boy, I was out working in my own effort and coming home tired at night and ignoring my kids or losing my first marriage or, again, a lot of failures, a lot of humility. And as I've learned later, I'm learning more to rest. He says, come to me and I'll give you rest. He says, my yoke is light. It's not a heavy burden. And so there's a lot of respite and guidance that I was not accessing early in my career, just to be perfectly honest with you, that we're accessing more today. And so even in the last 4 or 5 years, we've looked for that purpose, and we've pivoted a little bit where just like we have 5 portfolio companies today, we have 4 different ministries that we support, and we help them multiply, we help them grow, we give them some strategic planning, some time, treasure, and talent that we offer up and work to them. And God has helped give our time back. God's not only blessed us and restored our marriage or our kids and relationships or blessing, but he's actually given us some extra time. We're intentional about how we use that time, and it's been kind of amazing. I mean, we're very busy, but we're not we're so productive in what we're able to do that we feel that's kind of a gift from God. And I was not that way 20 years ago. Loved the Lord, but was still, struggling. Now, do we still have struggles? Absolutely. We have
Right.
constantly. We're replacing C-suite folks. That we just had a couple that left for better offers, and so we get that. But we're constantly meeting new people, and God's leading us to new folks or new opportunities, and that's been just a major blessing in our lives. We don't feel like we're striving as much, and don't need to. So, and one thing it's interesting. Somebody might say, "Well, yeah, you got resources now, so." I'll tell you something stupid in my earlier life. I was teaching a financial class at my church, and it was a Larry Burkett, Ron Blue financial class on paying your debt off and stuff. And so I've always been kind of a finance guy, so I was tapped to teach. There's 50 people in the room, and somebody had asked me a question during the question and answer period. Well, how much do you tithe? And I said, well, today's government burden is, 30% on average. And so I do a tithe after tax. I give about 7%. But I look at that as something that cannot believe I said that, how stupid it was. It was a compromise. It was an excuse. It was what I was actually doing. And one of my small group partners, who happened to be my CPA, he was in my small group, and he said, hey, just try just what God said in Malachi. Just test me on this for 90 days. Just do it for 90 days. Go to 10% for 90 days. And this is when we were broke as a joke. I mean, I was building businesses and cash poor and had some assets, but I could not believe in that next 90 days what amazing blessing God had brought, both financially but spiritually. Led a number of folks to the Lord in that period, had an amazing number of things happen. The business turned around. I don't know, it was just like a spiritual covering was placed. And not to go in detail on this call, but I'm happy to go into detail if somebody needs to know. But it was, suffice it to say, it was amazing. I never looked back. I said, oh my gosh, I was wrong. And we've just been really blessed today where we're able to over-tithe and support these ministries and do a lot of things that it's all His anyway. I'm going to die, and
Right.
it's all His. And so whatever we can do to help others and help lead others in the kingdom, we're going to do. And so that's a bit how God has certainly shaped and changed me. And we've really found we can't outgive Him.
Yeah. So in my life, I grew up as a foster kid and ran around in the streets and was a bad kid, and always had this abandonment issue and, chip on my shoulder. And I found that I've never been, really a fan of organized religion, but I'm certainly a fan of spirituality. And throughout that faith has continued to grow year after year. And now I do absolutely, I mean, you can read the book, The Richest Man in Babylon, and it has the lessons. Yeah. And one of the lessons is to invest 10% and to tithe 10% and to do that. And when I give to certain charities that I believe in, it's interesting because I've had my controller say, well, hey, you really can't afford to do that right now. And I'm like, yeah, I can, it'll all work out. And it tends to work out. Right. I mean, I haven't missed a meal yet. Everything is still working. So I really appreciate you being a guest on our show today. And again, for those of you listening, you can find him. You can go to LinkedIn or go to 320group.com. Stick around right after this, Todd. And thanks again for being here.
You bet. Thanks, Ford. Appreciate you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to Fordify Live. Make sure to like, comment, and share this episode on your favorite social media platform. And don't forget to subscribe to the Business Growth Show podcast, available wherever you get your podcast streaming fix. We air weekly at 11 a.m. Central Time. So until next week, keep pushing the boundaries and never stop growing.